Started. Okay, you're good to go.
Great, thank you, Jason. So I swear I didn't plan all the events going on right now around this presentation, but it's kind of amazing to sit here on September 11th, 16th anniversary of the terror attacks in New York City and other parts of our country 16 years ago today. And I hope we've all taken a moment to just think about that event, remember what we were doing, where we were, how we felt, and be grateful for, first responders and those who really step in to the fray when these events happen. We're seeing examples of that, in the last couple of weeks and today with natural disasters that are happening, and just an overwhelming response of Americans who are stepping up to help their neighbors, to help their fellow citizens. And it's something, that we really need to make sure that we're ready for. So when we talked about doing this disaster preparedness safety moment today, we thought that it would be a good idea to take it from the approach of, are you prepared at home? Because I know our cities and counties, we do a lot of work, FEMA training and making sure that we're ready to respond to these events. But that also requires that we're going to have to, have our own personal time available to be able to, take care of the community. So is our family going to be taken care of? Do we have what we need at home? And so that's what we're going to take a little time and talk about today. It's a huge topic, and I know our safety moments are usually supposed to be about 20 minutes or so. This is going to go a little bit longer. I'm going to warn you right now, but I'm going to start talking really fast right now as well so we can get through it in quick. So if you have any questions, save those for the end. And then also remember, we'll be sending out a copy of the presentation, as well as some supporting materials, other resources that may be helpful for you in your personal preparedness, disaster preparedness plans that you're going to be doing or that you've done with your family that you need to update. So, major disasters happen all the time. Sometimes we think, well, that's kind of a rarity. Those things, just happen every now and then, but really they're happening all the time. If you look on FEMA's website, you can actually pull up a list of all disasters, which is just hundreds, thousands of them. And you can also find a list of just major disaster declarations, the really big events. And it's kind of interesting going back the last 5-6 years, usually we're having at least an average of 3 major disaster declarations a month. 2016, we had 36 major disaster declarations, and so that's just an average of three a month. But actually, that's the lowest year out of the last 3 years. So far this year, just through today, I just rechecked these numbers this morning, we've had 55 natural major disaster declarations in the United States so far in 2017. So this is something that affects a lot of people and something we need to be prepared for. The type of disaster is going to vary. It can be a storm, it could be a wind event, tornado. We've seen those here in Utah. It could be a major winter storm. There can be floods. It could be an earthquake. We know that there's a major earthquake on the horizon for us sometime here in Utah. It could be another terrorist attack. It could be an epidemic. There could be a release of a chemical or some other contamination. It could be war, and we've seen that in the news lately, where we've, worried about the potential of war and a nuclear attack again. It's something we really haven't had to worry about or haven't worried about a whole lot over time, and that seems to be ramping up as well. Each of these different types of disasters are going to require that you have a slightly different plan. And we don't have the time this morning to go into a lot of detail on how you would deal with each of these different disasters in a different way. But understand, as you sit down and do your personal planning and your family planning, that you are looking at how a different type of disaster would affect you in your plan and how you need to have different plans for different events. So, does your family already, know, how are we going to make sure that everyone's aware when a disaster is happening? How do we know it's happening? How are we going to communicate with each other? How are we going to know where to meet, where to go, where to evacuate to, how to stay safe, how to make sure we have what we need in this event? Because once the event happens, it's going to be too late to put this stuff together. It's something we need to be ready for ahead of time. So first of all, just knowing that there's something happening, that's really important. The sooner I know that there's a disaster happening, the sooner I can activate my personal or my family emergency plan. So finding out is really important. IPAWS, or Integrated Public Alert Warning System, is something that we've seen for a long time. When I was a kid, you'd see those test patterns on the TV screen, you'd have the little tones on the radio, and we don't see those really anymore, but it's been replaced with more modern, up-to-date systems. So we will get these emergency alerts, when there is something, that we need to know about, whether it's a weather system or some other disaster or emergency. Wireless emergency alerts are probably going to be the way a lot of us are going to find out most quickly whether something's happening. And there's different apps that you can have on your phone. Sometimes just the news app that comes on your phone from the manufacturer will push alerts through to you if there's an emergency, but you always have to allow those alerts to push through. There's some really good apps out there that I think everybody should have on their phone. FEMA has a free app that you can download that will push alerts through to you, and these will know where you are based on the location of your phone, and also you'll enter in your zip code in there. And so if there's relevant emergencies to you, they push a notification through to you. The Red Cross, I actually like that one a little bit better than the FEMA app. And it does what the FEMA app does and a little bit more. It's called Red Cross Emergency, and that will push notifications to you as well. You can have apps on your phone that will allow you to monitor police radio, for example, 5.0 radio, and there's others. You can have these on there. So that's really important to make sure that you have a system that will alert you when something's happening. Also, the federal government will have systems for alerting us, whether that's over the radio or through these other apps that may come through to our phone. The state is going to have systems. Your city is going to have systems, whether it's their emergency management webpage, social media, Facebook, Twitter, other things, where the governments can get information out there. Your school district or even your kid's school may have, a Facebook page, some other social media, or a way of sending out alerts through text messages or other things that we need to make sure that we're aware of and make sure that we're on board with those communication systems so that we can get that information when it happens. When we sit down to make our plan with our family, we want to start out our emergency plan by talking about communication. I think this is a really good place to start. If an emergency happens, how do we get in touch with each other, and how do we make sure we have the information we need to be able to communicate with whoever we may need to communicate with? So the first step would be collecting phone numbers. I think we'll probably all admit that we don't have phone numbers memorized like we used to. I pull up my phone and I touch the little picture of my wife when I want to call her. I don't have to have her phone number memorized. So it's really important to make sure we make this list of relevant and emergency phone numbers, email addresses, because in an emergency, if the phone's not working or we lose the phone or whatever happens, we may need to make sure we have the ability to pull that information up otherwise. So collecting all your family's phone numbers, email addresses, and out-of-area contacts, your doctor or healthcare provider's emergency contacts. You may need to make sure you have contact information for your insurance company. And so make sure you get this information gathered. It's also important, as part of this communication plan, to make sure we know what other entities that are important to us, what their emergency plans involve. For example, the kids' school. How will the kids notify us if there's an emergency? How can we find out, what the school is doing in an emergency? How do we know where to pick up our kids or how to pick up our kids if there's an emergency going on? So we should be familiar with the emergency response plans for the schools, for your cities, for your counties, for your local government entities. For your work, your employer is going to have emergency action and emergency response plans. We need to make sure we know how those will interact with our family's emergency action plan. So especially, we need to know what the schools are doing, but our families should know how to find out what's going on with our work as well, because we may be busy and not able to get away to talk to family or take care of things. So they need to know what that emergency procedure is at our work. Who can pick up the kids from school? Have you made arrangements for a friend or another person that you trust to be able to pick up your kids at school? Does the school know who that is? Do your kids know who that is? Do you have a system for making sure your kids can identify someone that it's safe to go with, like a code word that person can give? The kids will know that person sent you. Do you have emergency meeting places set up ahead of time that your kids know where to go, that your family members know where to meet you? And we need to make sure, again, that we have this plan and these contact information on a hard copy, maybe on a small card, laminated in the kid's backpack, in your purse, in your wallet, in your glove box, wherever it is, so that you have that hard copy of that information. And then we can share that information with other people that are part of our plan as well, whether it's your out-of-town contact or so forth. Share that information with others. Also, put in your phone in case of emergency contacts. You know, let's say something happens to you. Someone can pick up your phone. If they look in your list, in your contact list, if you have a contact that says ICE, stands for in case of emergency, they'll know that's a person to call, you know, if something's happened to you, you know, in case of an emergency. So put, you know, those in your phone. Have a few of those ICE contacts in your phone so anybody looking through your list will know. Also set up emergency groups in your contacts so that you can just pull up a group and send a text message to that entire group. That's a great way to activate your emergency action plan with your family. You pull up your family's emergency group list and you send a text message to that group with whatever message that you've predetermined with your family is going to communicate what you need them to know. You know, make sure everybody knows how to use that system. If grandma and grandpa are part of this and they are your out-of-town contact or they're part of your group, you know, for this emergency, make sure that they know how to send and receive and see those text messages and send text messages to the group. Make sure everybody knows how to use this system. You probably want to identify some code words or phrases that will tell members of the group what's happening, you know, in the emergency, if we want to meet, where we're going to meet. And so you may have a series of, you know, 2, 3, maybe a half a dozen of different code words or phrases to use in that emergency that will trigger your family to respond to a different prearranged, you know, course of action that we want them to follow. Number one, where to meet. And so it's really important because our meeting place may be affected by the type of disaster that's going on. And so if the house is on fire, of course, you know, we need to know how to evacuate the house and where to meet outside. So that's going to be your most immediate meeting place. But there may be one in the neighborhood. Maybe it's at the park or the library, you know, where we decide we're going to meet. If this is a little bit bigger disaster, but it's still right in our community and we need to be able to meet close to home, what's that place where we can meet? Maybe it's someplace we need to be outside of the neighborhood. Maybe it's out of town. And so you probably need to have 3 or 4 different meeting places identified beforehand, depending on the scope of the emergency and how far away from home you may need to meet up. If a major disaster happens and we can't get together locally, you know, maybe we need to know, hey, we're going to, you know, you need to try and get to this town and meet at Aunt Sally's house. You know, and that's going to be our goal. If we can't get in touch with each other and there's no way to get together here locally, we're separated, you know, that's where we're going to go. Those kind of programs need to be identified ahead of time. And then we need to make sure we practice them, just like we would our emergency evacuation or emergency action plan at work. We need to make sure that as a family, once or twice a year, that we will send out a text message to the group, you know, to do a test. Do we recognize the code words or the key phrases that we've predetermined, and do we know what exactly those mean? So, you know, once a year, do a practice, text your group, everybody, your immediate family, your out-of-town contacts, you know, make sure everybody is responding appropriately to that test. Make sure people even meet up at the location. That could be part of your task, to send out that text message and then everybody make their way, you know, to the library or to the park to meet up there. Also, talk about ahead of time with your family, how do we get there? You know, what kind of transportation is going to be available to us? Is there any alternate transportation that, you know, family members need to be aware they can use if primary sources of transportation aren't available? To make sure that when we practice, then we also discuss how well we did after we do the practice, and make sure that we use that as an opportunity to tune up our plan and update the plan. And we should do that at least once a year, make sure it's current. And then maybe just occasionally throughout the year, you know, over dinner or whatever, you know, just kind of throw it out there and, you know, the key words or key phrases, and make sure that everybody remembers what means, because often your communication is going to have to be very short or succinct. You may not be able to make a voice call, and you may not even be able to send a really large text message, but that's why we want to be able to keep those messages as short as possible. Our cell phones are going to be our primary source of communication generally. And as long as that system's working, that's probably what we're going to use. So when you have that, we want to make sure part of our plan also includes how to make sure that's going to work as well and as long as possible for us. So preserve your battery life. You can dim your screen so that it doesn't use up as much battery. You can make sure you close all windows on the device and close any apps that are running in the background. Most phones even have a low power mode. You can go into settings under the battery icon and select the low power mode to make sure that your phone uses that battery, as long as possible. In case we can't charge the phone up if the power's out or something. Make sure you have chargers, having a solar charger is a great way to make sure that you can get that phone charged up, or a charger for the car so you can charge it off the car battery, or even a backup battery pack that you can charge the phone off are really important things to have to make sure you can stay in contact. If you make a voice call, make sure you keep it short. A voice call uses a lot of bandwidth. And so in an emergency, if it's a major disaster or even a fairly localized disaster, your phone system could get overwhelmed in a hurry. And so if you make a phone call, a voice call, make sure you keep that call short as possible to try and keep that network up and operating for everybody. Text is best because it uses the least amount of bandwidth. So sending that short text message, that everybody already will understand from your predetermined planning what those messages mean. If you can get on the internet or on a Wi-Fi system, you can use voice over the internet programs. You can use Skype or WeChat or things that will allow you to make a phone call over the internet instead of using the cell phone system. And that's a good backup to have. Make sure you have an app on your phone for one of those calling, over the internet calling programs. I used WeChat with my wife this summer when she was out of the country, and that was great because we could make voice calls on it, we could make video calls on it, and we could even use it for sending text messages. So even, if the cell phone system isn't working, if I can get my device on the internet, I can still send those text messages through that I need to my emergency contacts. Know where there's a landline that you can use. A lot of us don't even have a landline in our homes anymore, and if we do, it's hooked up to the internet, not directly wired to the phone company. And so the cell system may be down, the internet may not be working, at least locally. But if you can find a landline, that system might be working. So even if you don't have a landline in your home, know if any of your neighbors still have a landline directly wired to the phone company, because that may be your option for being able to get those phone calls out. Also, your community, when they have their emergency management system, your neighborhoods, your cities, there will be people out there, with their ham radios, and usually there's going to be a location somewhere in your neighborhood and in your city where ham operators will be out there and be available to help communicate. They may be able to help you make a phone call over the ham radio, or you also may want to have FRS radios for your family, so you just have some walkie-talkies that are going to work in just about any situation as long as you're within range with each other. So there's a lot of options there for having in your communication plan that you need to work out ahead of time and make sure everybody knows how to use them. If we're going to have to evacuate, make sure that you know how you're going to do that. Again, it's going to vary depending on the type of emergency or the type of disaster that's happened, but how am I going to leave? How are we going to get out of the neighborhood? And so be aware of where you may have to cross bridges, for example, because if it's an earthquake, those bridges may not be safe, so you may want to avoid bridges. If it's a flooding event, then you may not want to go along the river road or really low roads that may be flooded. You may want to identify ahead of time what are the high roads, what are the roads without bridges or overpasses where we can get out of our neighborhood, get out of the area. What are our means of transportation? Where are we going to go to when we evacuate? Do we have our go bag and our go kits prepared and packed ahead of time? Make sure that when you're evacuating, you follow the directions of the local authorities, because they will tell you routes to be able to get out of the city, get out of the county, get out of the state, whatever it is. If you try to use other routes to avoid traffic, you may very well wind up on routes that are blocked or damaged so that you can't get through, and then you could wind up being really stuck. So, have that plan, know how to get out of your immediate area safely, depending with different situations, and listen to local authorities for evacuation routes. If you need to be able to get out of town, get out of state, on an evacuation, we may use, a car, a bus, a train, airport. We may have to hike out. But whatever it is, if we're going to have to evacuate, make sure we activate that plan early. Don't put it off and wait till as late as possible, because it's going to take time. We've seen that in Florida this weekend, how the cars have just backed up for hours and everybody heading north. You've got to have that time to get out, because there is going to be congestion and traffic is going to be moving more slowly. So make sure you take that into consideration. If you wait till the emergency's on you and you go to the airport to try and get a ticket, it's not going to happen. Pretty unlikely that even if flights are still coming in and out, the flights are going to be full already. So make sure you think about that ahead of time. Make sure you are prepared and leaving, or have your family doing their evacuation and leaving as soon as possible. If you're going by car, make sure that your go bag and your go kits are ready to go and just put in the trunk or in the back of the truck and ready to go. Make sure they're packed to fit in the car. Quick and easy loading. Test it ahead of time. Make sure everything and everyone fits in the vehicle. If you're anticipating an evacuation, like in Florida we saw this past week, and even in Texas before that, there were days of notice ahead of time where they knew they would be evacuating or might be evacuating. Make sure you keep the gas tank in your car full, because that fuel, your sources of fuel, are going to disappear in a hurry. Even if you're not anticipating evacuation, always keep your gas tank at least half full. That way, even if you're not anticipating an emergency and something happens, you've got fuel to get someplace, at least enough to get, 100, a couple hundred miles on what you've got in the vehicle. Don't run your tank all the way down to empty. Keep that half full all the time. And when you evacuate, you may have multiple cars you want to take, multiple vehicles you want to take, but try and get everybody out, if all your stuff out, and one vehicle if you can, because everybody out there evacuates with multiple vehicles. That's going to make the congestion that much slower and that much more difficult. So plan that ahead. Make sure the vehicle is going to be one you get everybody and everything in, and try and just use that one vehicle. If you're going to be going by car, make sure you're not going to get stranded because of the car. All the time, make sure your vehicle is maintained. Simple failures can strand you, especially in an emergency. And so make sure you're on top of keeping your fluids in good condition and full. Make sure your brakes are in good condition. If you have any reason to think your brakes are getting anywhere close to bad, make sure you're taking care of that. Your tires, don't let them get bald. Make sure you've got good tires that are going to be puncture resistant, that are going to get you in and out, that have the right traction. If it's wintertime and it's a severe weather event, you're going to want to make sure you have those snow tires on that vehicle if you're going to have to, do an evacuation. Wipers, lights, the thermostat. There's a real basic mechanical thing that's cheap and easy to fix, but if it's at all dodgy and you're doing an evacuation, that may be the thing that shuts you down and keeps you from being able to get out. So keep that vehicle in good condition. Also, in an emergency, trying to get out by vehicle is some things you want to make sure that you are aware of and ready for. Again, winter traction. Also, don't drive through deep water. Some vehicles may stall out, get swamped and stall out in as little as 6 inches of water. Some vehicles may even float in as little as 12 inches of water. And you may have a higher clearance vehicle that can handle a little more than that, but you can get over your intake and get that vehicle in trouble in a hurry. So do not try and drive through deep water. Be careful about trying to walk through deep water. If the water is swift moving, it only takes a few inches of water to knock you off your feet. If it's moving really fast and there's unseen hazards that may be down there in that water. So again, try and make sure you've got an evacuation route that keeps you on high ground as much as possible. Floods can also destabilize the road. So even after the water has receded, you may have roadways that may give way under the weight of your vehicle because of damage to the road. Also, bridges, again, could, depending on the event, could be damaged. We want to avoid. If you're ever in a situation where there's down power lines near your vehicle, if it's wet or if it's on your vehicle, stay in your vehicle. Don't get out of the vehicle with those down power lines out there around you. Where are we going to evacuate to? Again, depends on the type of disaster. Sometimes we may be able to just stay put at home. Other times we may be looking for some commercial lodging if home isn't an option. We've had a fire or something like that. Maybe I can't get away from work, and that's going to be the case for a lot of us. We're going to be stuck at work either because we can't get home or because we have to be at work. And so what is my plan if I'm going to have to stay at work? Do I have friends that I've made arrangements ahead of time with where we can shelter? Do I have portable shelter in case we have to camp out somewhere for a while? If we have to provide our own shelter outside, do I have a plan for that? Mass care facilities also are going to be available to us in a disaster. If you're going to write it out at home, make sure that you're not writing it out in a disaster where you shouldn't be writing it out at home. We see a lot of people this weekend trying to write it out down in Florida, and that's probably not a good idea. If they tell us we need to evacuate, we need to get out of there. But we've had situations where we've been maybe stuck at home for a day or two or three without any power. You need to be prepared at home. Is there adequate protection in your home from the disaster? Have you identified the part of your house that will provide you maximum protection, from the event? Is it your basement, the bathroom? Usually are areas we should be looking at where we have maximum protection, but identify that area of your house that is your safe area. Make sure that you've prepared the house and that it's stocked up with water, medications, a way to stay warm, food, sanitation, communication. Think about how that's going to work in your home and if you have enough to get through an emergency. Do I need to be able to seal that emergency room, my shelter room? Have plastic and duct tape ready because you may need to seal up windows and doors to keep, a lot of particulate, radiation, other contamination that's outside in the air out of your safe room. So be prepared for that for writing it out at home. Commercial lodging, that may be an option, but if it's a mass disaster, good luck. That can be real difficult. Identify a hotel in your area that you may use that will have what you need. What amenities are you going to need? Are you going to want someplace that has a laundry or other things? That may be something to look at ahead of time. Have a relationship with the hotel. Be a rewards member of a certain chain or a couple of chains. That way, when you have an emergency, you have to be out of the house. You've got someplace to go where maybe that preferential treatment will help you get what you need. Also, rewards points that you accumulate can help cover the cost of that emergency housing as well. If you have to, shelter at work, make sure that we look at our employer's emergency plan and how that's going to work with us if we have to spend overnight or several days at work. Do we have food and water available at work? Do we keep a change of clothing with us at work? What are going to be our sleeping arrangements? Do we have an emergency kit? I keep a personal emergency kit in my vehicle, so that it's here with me if I need it. Maybe I keep one in my desk or in my locker, along with a change of clothing. Also, if you got friends and you're going to shelter with friends in certain emergencies, make sure that's a part of your emergency plan. Make sure you pick really good friends, maybe the ones that have really nice big houses. I don't know. Friends in Hawaii that you can go shelter with. But make sure that you have different ones identified, because I may not be able to, evacuate to the area where one friend is, but if I've got another friend south instead of north, maybe I can get there, or maybe they won't be affected, so have that worked into your plans. Whether it's a friend in the neighborhood or a friend out of town, we may need to have several different friends that we've identified where we can shelter. And quid pro quo with those friends, plan with them ahead of time. If I have a disaster, I can come to you, and if you have a disaster, you can come to me and plan together with your emergencies. But bring your emergency supply kit. Even if you're going someplace, where you think all your needs will be taken care of, still make sure you bring that emergency supply kit along with you. If you need to be able to camp out and provide yourself a shelter outdoors, make sure that you've got those materials already pre-packed. This is going to be something you're going to need a bigger container for, so you can get your tent and your sleeping bags and other materials like that ready to go, but have it pre-packed in containers that are going to fit in the vehicle for quick and easy loading. If you're going to have to go to a mass care facility, make sure that ahead of time. I've spent the night in a disaster shelter, and it's not a lot of fun. They will have food, medications there likely, some first aid will be available there, communications will probably be available there, but it's going to be crowded. You're going to have a lot of people around you. You're probably not going to have any privacy, or not very much privacy. It's not going to be very comfortable either. Cooperation is essential. You go to a mass care facility, you better make sure that you are cooperating with others, and especially those who are directing that facility. As soon as people stop cooperating with people running the facility, they can get ugly in a hurry. Make sure you know ahead of time. If you're going to a disaster relief center, to a mass care shelter, they will not allow alcohol or weapons in there. And as we've seen in Texas this last week, and probably in Florida, they check you when you're coming in. They make sure you're not bringing in any weapons. So don't come in there packing thinking you're just protecting yourself, because they're probably not going to allow that in the shelter. If I need to be able to find a shelter in my area, there's a couple things we can do really quick and easy to find a shelter. Number one, text to the number 43362. Another way to remember it is for FEMA. And if you text shelter, the word shelter, and your zip code to that number, they will send you back, information about shelters that are in your area close to you in an emergency. Another way you can do that is you can have these apps on your phone. The FEMA app has a map on there that will show you where shelters are. And so you can just pull up that map, and if you're online or if you've got data coming into your phone, it'll show you exactly where shelters are. The Red Cross Emergency app also has that on it. And actually, I like the map and stuff on the Red Cross app a little bit better. And so you can go on there, you can see where a shelter is close by. Also, the Red Cross First Aid app is a great app. It will let you, pass off different skills and take tests to know that you know how to do first aid. And even if you don't, you can use the app to look up specific first aid step by step in an emergency. Have more than one emergency kit for different types of emergencies. I'm always going to have a car safety kit in my vehicle, and I should have a 72-hour kit, would be my next, biggest emergency kit that I'm going to have ready to go if I have to leave in a hurry and take something with me. That's going to fit in a small suitcase or in a backpack. If I'm going to have to provide my own shelter out of doors, that camp out kit, that's what I called it, it's going to be something that's going to be a little bit bigger. I'm going to grab my 72-hour kit, and I'm going to have, some other totes preloaded with all my gear so I can just grab them and throw them in the truck. That's going to be my next biggest one. The biggest emergency preparedness, that you're going to have is your in-home emergency preparedness, your food storage, water storage, stuff that's way more that, is bigger than what you can carry. But if you're going to be at home for days or even weeks without power or the ability to get food and water, make sure you have that in place in your home ahead of time. And so we've got different sizes of emergency preparedness kits that we need to be thinking about. My car safety kit, pretty basic, tools, jumper cables, tow strap, flashlight, reflective triangle, a first aid kit, something to help with traction, kitty litter or salt in there. Collapsible shovel, a cell phone, your cell phone charger, reflective vest, emergency blankets, a change of warm clothing, food and water, are all things that I try to always keep that stuff in my vehicle all the time. Then my go bag or my 72-hour kit is going to have, a kit for each person. So everybody in the family grabs their kit, their backpack, whatever, that's preloaded, ready to go. It's packed, it's easy to carry. If we have to walk out, it's on our back and we're good to go. Buckets, that's another way. They got a handle, they're waterproof. That's a good thing about 5-gallon buckets that you might use for your kits. Totes, a higher capacity. You may get totes with actual wheels on them. They can help keep water off your stuff and be easy to move and have a large capacity of things. So your go kit, remember water, 1 gallon of water per person per day. Make sure you've got, at least 3 days worth of non-perishable high energy food in there. So stuff with a lot of carbohydrates, you're looking for, probably dehydrated items that don't weigh very much, that pack in there, that'll give you a lot of food. Eating utensils, a mess kit, a radio, either battery operated, hand cranked, or something like that, your sleeping gear, even if that's just like emergency blankets. And you want to make sure that, you've got, the containers that you can take out of there easily. Emergency signal is also a great thing to have in there, just a little whistle or something. Sanitary supplies, so sanitizer, toilet paper, other things like that. You want to make sure you have some tools, multi-tools, can opener, plastic sheeting or garbage bags, duct tape, zip ties are all things that can serve a lot of purposes in an emergency. Insect repellent and sunscreen might be really good things to make sure you have in there along with your first aid supplies. You know, something to write with in case you need to leave a message behind for someone, or you need to put up a sign somewhere. A little cash and a credit card. You know, make sure your cash is in small denominations, 1s, 5s, 10s. You know, if you've got your emergency money in 50s and 100s, you're probably going to have a hard time finding someone to make change for you, you know, in certain situations. Your emergency contact list should be in your go bag as well. Maps, prescription medication, change of clothing, dry socks, a poncho or plastic bags for rain gear. You know, if you're going to have to be, you know, sheltering out, you know, have that bigger tote with your sleeping bags, sleeping mats, water purification, you know, something to cook with, a lighter or fire starter, assuming flames are safe. You know, if you're in an area where there may be gas leaks or something, make sure you're not lighting any fires. A hatchet, a camp shovel, or things that you can get in a fairly small container. Also, when you have to evacuate, you want to make sure you've got documents that you may need. So identification, passport, social security card are good things to make sure you've got ready to go on a moment's notice, or have them digitized so that you've got at least a picture of those identification documents. Your medical history, insurance cards could be really important, you know, in this situation. Obviously, insurance policy numbers, and I would remind you, when you're looking at your homeowner's insurance, make sure that you've thought ahead about flooding, earth movement, because floods and earthquakes generally aren't going to be covered by your homeowner's policy. So think about that ahead of time. Make sure you have the coverage that you need and you know how to contact your agent. Make sure that you've done a home inventory and you've got that with your documents, maybe digitized on a small thumb drive. Important things that are difficult to replace or impossible to replace. Have a fireproof, secure storage facility in your home, whether that's a fireproof fire cabinet or a safe or something, but something that can keep those valuables and irreplaceables or difficult to replace things safe in a fire. So to summarize, you know, have your family emergency plan done and prepared ahead of time. And so it can be executed with or without you. If you're stuck at work and you can't get to your family, you know, make sure that your kids and your spouse and anybody else in your family, that they know what to do, that we've practiced this plan so that you can be confident that they have what they need and that they're going to be safe while you're performing your duties. Make sure you've got that communication, meeting places, evacuation plan worked out ahead of time. You know, what are your sheltering options? Variations for different possible disasters. You may need to have, you know, 3 or 4 different variations of your emergency action plan depending on what kind of disaster it is. And practice that plan ahead of time so that the family will respond quickly and well. Have your go kits ready to go in different sizes. You know, my 72-hour kit or my camp out kit. You know, if I've got time and space, I can grab all of them. Or if I don't, I can just grab that 72-hour kit and go. Prepare your supplies and pack in units so that you can get them loaded in the vehicle quickly. All of your containers should fit in that vehicle. Practice fit the people and the gear in the vehicle. Don't forget documents that you may need. If you have the means to digitize them and have access to it, that's going to be a real easy way, but you may also need to make sure you have a way to make sure you bring hard copies with you as well. Again, review and practice your plan. Resources you can look at, there's a lot out there. Ready.gov has a ton of stuff. In fact, I prepared a PDF with a lot of sample documents of things to help you put these plans together. A lot of them come off of Ready.gov. We'll send those out along with the copy of the presentation. FEMA.gov also has great resources. BeReady.utah.gov is another one. The Center for Disease Control, emergency.cdc.gov is another great resource. National Safety Council and Red Cross are great resources, and your communities, your individual cities may have their emergency management webpage or social media. For example, Salt Lake City has BeReadySLC.com, and so know your local resources for emergency preparedness and emergency information as well. Jason, any questions out there?
No questions, but we did have a comment. Debbie says, you did not mention pets as part of family, but they need similar items from a family perspective.
Well, thank you, Debbie. I did see a lot of the information that you'll look at on FEMA's webpage and Ready.gov. They mention that. I knew I was condensing this information, so I didn't mention pets, but absolutely make sure you work that in, because There may be issues bringing pets into an emergency shelter or other places where you're going to shelter, making sure your pets are safe. So that is something you really want to consider if you have those pets that are part of your family that are really important to you.
Yeah. Great, Doug. I was looking at Twitter last night, and there was a tweet that came from one of the emergency management agencies down in Florida, talking about it was one of the communities where the eye of the hurricane was right there. The eye wall was just about to hit them. And one of the things it said in there was, "Put your shoes on now." And I thought, I think that's a pretty good symbol of preparedness. Don't wait to put your shoes on. Get your stuff together. Anyway, I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. Let's see. Had another comment here. Easy way to digitize documents is just to take a picture on your phone.
Yep.
Yeah, and especially if you've got that backed up to a cloud service, so that picture goes automatically to your cloud service. So if you lose your device, but you may be able to, once you get somewhere where you can log in, you can get to that information. So great.
Documents and your home inventory. So you may have a folder for pictures. Just go around your house, and do a video or still shots of all the contents of your house. That could be something that you may, you would need if there's damage or loss of your home. Great.
Well, we know we've been a little bit long on this one. It's such an important subject. We decided that it's okay to maybe go a little bit long here, because we don't know what the emergency is. We don't know when it's going to happen. But for each of us, that preparedness is pretty essential. Thanks so much, Doug, for your time and preparation and good presentation. Everybody, be safe out there. Have a safe day.